A description of Anthony Schaeffer's protagonist in the film The Wicker Man, and I quote, "Tearing around in dizzying circles trying to solve it, never able to guess the true plot beyond it, although the evidence of it lies all around him," end quote. Cinefantastique. Charles Hoy Fort said this, "Almost all people of all eras are hypnotics. Their beliefs are induced beliefs. The proper authorities saw to it that the proper belief should be induced, and people believed properly." J.H. Towson, in Clowns, said this, quote, "As the mountebank delivered his harangue, the clown would repeatedly poke his head out from behind the curtain, making fun of everything his master said, parodying his patter and twisting the meaning of his words. The mountebank played the perfect straight man meanwhile. Here he was, trying so hard to hawk his wares, and his assistant was doing everything possible to undermine sales. The merriment was, of course, intentional. While the clown seemingly encouraged the public not to buy the proffered merchandise, the mountebank knew full well that the bystanders would easily be converted into customers as soon as they forgot that they were, in fact, supposed to be buying. Once the audience had been effectively hypnotized, once its judgment and willpower had been weakened, the real sales pitch could begin," end quote. And in the Encyclopedia of Freemasonry, Dr. Albert Mackey, 33rd degree, defines hoodwink as, quote, "A symbol of the secrecy, silence, and darkness in which the mysteries of our art should be preserved from the unhallowed gaze of the profane," end quote. In a study, ladies and gentlemen, of mind control and psychological warfare, it is not enough to simply review the latest technology of coercion, the most recent gadgetry and techno-junk littering the hardware and supply depots of governments and so-called cults. You see, far more dangerous than these appliances is the praxis behind them, ages old, the underground current which informs the modern project and this modern era. You see, for life in our modern era is little more than life in an open-air mind control laboratory where a form of human alchemy has emerged to transform the mass of targeted percipients, the lead, targeted merely by virtue of their being urban dwellers plugged into the electronic and digital pageantry of the establishment's system of things, into the perfect human zombie, gold. To those who practice this ancient science that has never meant what any of you ever thought. I've heard so many people ridicule alchemy as being absolutely impossible to transform base elements. But you see, that's not what it was ever about. Not ever. In those days, when the church and kings ruled with an iron hand, and anyone who did anything that was not politically correct or religiously correct were swiftly and most terribly punished. So they disguised their true intent and their true teachings, the esoteric, with a system of exoteric descriptions that to the profane would mean one thing, and to the initiate or the adept would mean quite another. But that was then. This is now. What sort of creature inhabits the modern domain? Who is the modern man? Well, the puppet masters say he is the smartest, most advanced individual to ever strut the planet, the most relatively liberated being in history. But Louis Ferdinand Céline said it well, quote, "What does the modern public want? It wants to go down on its knees before money and before crap," end quote. You see, the public have been trained to do this by two principal methods: direct speaking archetypal messages of pure terror, psychic driving, as the CIA's Dr. Ewan Cameron termed it, encoded in massively publicized lone nut mass murders, and the sinister flattery heaped upon them by their masters in the cult of civilization and progress. The acid test of a human being's freedom and will to protect the quality of his life lies in a person's attitude toward his oppressor. And what is modern man's attitude? Toward Wall Street and the bankers and the elite, that body of adepts known as the secret college, that combined are known as the Illuminati or the Order. What is modern man's attitude toward Dan Rather and the ignorance-bestowing media and advertising man, toward Lincoln and Truman, Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Reagan, George Bush, Johnny Carson, Exxon and Monsanto, and William Clinton? Well, as one writer has observed, and I quote, "The most amazing thing about the American people is that they are constantly defending their worst betrayers," end quote. So I ask you again, who then is the modern man? Well, if you've listened to this broadcast long enough, you know my interpretation. He is a mind-bombed patsy, an ignorant, apathetic twit who gets his marching orders from twilight language, keywords sprinkled throughout his news and current events. And even as he dances to the tune of the elite managers of human behavior, provoked by buzzwords, he scoffs with great derision at the idea of the existence and operation of a technology of mass mind control emanating from the media and government. And that is most unfortunate. Modern man believes that he is much too smart to believe anything as superstitious as that. But the truth is, modern man, ladies and gentlemen, is the ideal hypnotic subject, puffed up on the idea that he is the crown of creation. He vehemently denies the power of the hypnotist's control over him, even as his head bobs up and down on the string. Anyone who believes what anyone else writes or says without thoroughly researching it and making sure that it is absolutely true is a puppet on a string. And when the puppet master calls the tune, he will dance. What we observe in the population today are the three destructive symptoms of persons whose minds are controlled by alien forces, and I do not mean from Mars. These forces are amnesia, in effect loss of memory. The second is abulia, or loss of will. The third is apathy, loss of interest in events vital to one's own health and survival. Amnesia, abulia, and apathy are nearly universal among us today and gaining a greater foothold with every passing day. A Japanese philosopher, George Osawa, stated that there was only one incurable sickness, arrogance. If a patient does not regard himself as sick, he cannot submit to a cure. That's why I've urged you, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to see what is wrong with America today, go into your bathroom and look into the mirror. You will find the problem staring at you. And at that point, when you make that realization, you must admit to yourself, I have been stupid, I am ignorant, I am apathetic, and I must change. And if you do not, nothing will change, nothing will become better. Nothing at all. The arrogant man does not need to see. He already sees almost everything. And what he thinks he has yet to learn, he believes the experts will one day show him. And who are these experts? They're not really doctors of the soul, ladies and gentlemen. They do not have the man's interest at heart. They are, in fact, his worst enemies, his most cunning manipulators who lead him to do their bidding like any slave master since Egypt. Why then does modern man revere them? Well, very simply, because, ladies and gentlemen, they flatter him. And that's why you don't get any flattery from me, ever. You never have. I call the shots as they are. I tell you the truth, no matter who it hurts or helps, even if it hurts me. And oh, how you hate it. Oh, how you hate to hear the truth. The man who tells the truth is universally disliked by every person. Because every person has an agenda and is hiding behind a fantasy which the truth penetrates like an arrow and leaves him stripped naked before the whole universe. And he does not like that. But yet it must be. For a great man once said, my leader once said, seek ye the truth, and the truth will make you free. Nothing else will. And without the truth, no man or woman is free, can be free, or ever will be free. But the truth hurts. The truth strips all away and stands golden before all men. Yet how many of you trade that gold of the truth for the lead of the fantasy and the lies? How many of you are going backward in the alchemical process? Modern man reveres his puppet masters, his overseers, because they flatter him. This is the very first secret of mass mind control and can be observed as the foundation stone of virtually every single false religion, party, cult, philosophy, system, training, and great organized church. How can modern man free himself when he is told that he is already a demigod? That the problem lies only in finding a pure enough economic or political system worthy of his high-minded brilliance. Oh. If we look closely, we will see, ladies and gentlemen, that this mind control principle is so basic and simple, it is almost stupidly so, to the point that we marvel that anyone would or could be seduced by it. But it's only a matter of attention, as we saw in the parable of the mountebank and the clown. You see, arrogant hypnopatsies have been told by their masters that they are demigods, and demigods are never deceived or distracted. They're too smart. And by their arrogant self-satisfaction, they blind themselves to the simplicity of the device that ensnares them, and that is when the real sales pitch begins. You see, what the alchemical managers have bred over a millennia is a human race of the most wretched stupidity and ignorance unrivaled in thousands of years. These blind slaves are told they are free and highly educated, and they believe it, even as they march behind signs that would cause any medieval peasant to run screaming away from them in panic-stricken terror. The symbols that modern man embraces with the naive trust of an infant would be tantamount to billboards reading, quote, "This way to your death and enslavement," end quote, to the understanding of a traditional peasant of antiquity. It was their world. They understood it perfectly. I doubt seriously any medieval man would have much difficulty in feeling a sense of overwhelming foreboding in the face of the Soviet hammer and sickle symbol. Yet most modern literate people obviously don't know a thing about what that symbol actually represents, except on the most profane level as the implements of the farmer and the worker. You really believe that? The sickle, ladies and gentlemen, symbolizes Saturn, also known as Kronos, Saturn, or as the Greeks called it, Demiurgos, the operating engineer of the universe, as opposed to the creator of that universe, Satan, Lucifer. In the reign of Saturn, we see exorbitant building and modeling activities, and this is reflected in the Masonic reference to their god as the big builder or architect, and their nickname, the Builders. Who erected the Tower of Babel. All this sounds reasonably attractive. Many of us can appreciate magnificent buildings and splendid projects along those lines. But as usual, ladies and gentlemen, there's much more to it than this. You see, that's the exoteric interpretation. Underneath is the truth. How many of you drive Saturns? How many of you drive Mazdas? How many of you even know the origin of those names and what they stand for? This Saturnian Masonic edifice complex, not Oedipus, but edifice complex, ultimately is building against the grain, against nature. What's wrong with that? Well, you'll stick with me and you'll see. At the beginning, in the early eras, nature's forces were manipulated with a knowledge which required the greatest intimacy with her ways, as reflected in the various megalithic structures in the British Isles, Europe, and even ancient America. There's even beauty, simplicity, and power in this early architecture. And modern enthusiasts have mistaken the knowledge and sensitivity to natural forces intrinsic to this ancient technology as indicative of a positive force at work. But actually, with some crucial exceptions, the rise of the megaliths marked the rise of the Hermetic Academy into its dominant physical phase. The theory is that the megaliths pin down natural forces, helping to subdue nature's most savage furies. We marvel today at the Hoover Dam, but that symbol-laden construction is but a crude parody of the technology of the megaliths which helped to dam the wildest forces of nature. The construction of these megaliths, heralded by New Age types as marvels of ancient ingenuity and cooperation with nature, are actually the first physical evidence of the end of Eden, of that period on earth when humanity lived as the servants and friends of God's natural creation, as nomads and hunter-gatherers. You see, the great error of modern enthusiasts for what they regard as the magical, Merlin-esque, harmonious time of the Druids and Stonehenge in ancient Egypt is ignorance of the fact that the historical period they idolize was itself immersed in a pampering technology and materialism, which essentially marked a revolutionary break. A break. The cutting off. The severing of man's relation with the natural order. Well, what is wrong with that, you say? Well, according to John Mitchell, he said, the first revolution of Olympus marks the first deviation from the primeval ways of men presided over by Cronus, otherwise Saturn. End quote. Saturn is Lucifer, Satan. And this revolution marks the end of man's Edenic relationship with the natural world. You never understood it before, did you? I hope you're beginning to now. Henceforward, man is alienated from nature by means of the Saturnian Scythe, which symbolizes the sense of separation from God's natural creation that man experienced after the fall. You see how simple it all really is? And it really is that simple, ladies and gentlemen. Don't go away. I'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, man began his peregrination away from Eden through his conceit that he would become as God. Remember what happened in the Garden of Eden? God told Adam and Eve to tend the garden. Don't eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. He commanded them not to. And he told them what would happen if they did. If ye do, ye will surely die. Lucifer, through his agent Satan, seduced Eve and told her, God lied to you. He's hiding your true nature. He doesn't want you to know that if you eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you too will become as gods. And Eve, in turn, seduced Adam. That's the story in the book of Genesis. Now, I'm not telling any of you to believe any of this. I am teaching you the esoteric knowledge of the mysteries. And in these mystery schools and mystery religions, they believe that Lucifer was the good one and God, Jehovah, was the bad one, because he was holding man enslaved in the chains, the bonds of ignorance in this Garden of Eden. Lucifer, through his agent Satan, set man free, knocked off the chains with the gift of knowledge. And through the use of this gift of knowledge, man himself will become God. That is the story. And so many people fall for this deception. For no man, I can assure you, will ever be God. Ever. No part can ever be equal to or greater than the whole. That's one of the greatest lessons you can ever learn. You think you could pick up a bushel of apples, squeeze them together and make the original tree from which they came? No. You can take the seed from the apple and plant it and grow another apple tree, but that apple tree will not be the original tree from which the seed sprang. Never. Not ever in a million years. Nor can all of the apple trees from all of the seeds from all of the apples that fell from that tree ever in their entirety be that same original tree. Now, of course, I'm making a little metaphor here, which is nothing even approaching the discrepancy between man becoming a god and God, who made man. And I hope you can understand that. Man has a conceit that he would become as God. Yet, as soon as he left the divine plan for the occult process, his stated objective became the Kabbalistic tikkun olam, or, quote, repair of the world, end quote. In other words, God's creation was not perfect. Man is going to perfect it. Man is going to repair the imperfections in God's world via the intervention and imposition of human brain power, the very egomaniacal device that caused the separation from God's natural Eden in the very first place. Repair of the world. Indeed, a world the Kabbalists had only just ruined. Repair the world? Man can't even repair himself. I don't know any man that's perfect. I don't know any man that hasn't had problems. I don't know any man that's not hiding some dastardly secret he doesn't want anybody else to know. I don't know any man who hasn't done wrong to himself or others. Repair the world? Repair yourself first. And I doubt it can be done. It is not the nature of man. After the Saturnian division, Hermetic man saw himself as separate and inevitably above nature, though always quick to identify himself as nature's benign shepherd. Oh, what a deception this is. This mighty occult shepherd king figure has emerged in history under the forms of Arthur, Merlin, Pendragon, Prester John, John F. Kennedy, and many others. He is the personification of the manipulation of nature by secret technology on behalf of a secret hierarchy, which, if known at all, is always careful to present itself as the supreme friend of divine creation. If the expulsion from the Garden of Eden, that is to say, the literal alteration of man's circumstance of living solely upon God's bounty and providence, was the result of satanic intervention, why has it not dawned on us that civilization is itself satanic? Oh, that's a good one to send you to bed with, isn't it? But that's exactly the question that you should be pondering. In the Hermetic Masonic tradition, the secret identity of Satan is the force represented in occult lore as emanating from the star Sirius, the so-called dog star, Canis Major. And in the secret tradition of the Freemasons, Sirius is overwhelmingly identified with a single primary attribute, the bringing of civilization to Earth. The heirs of this magical current were saluted by the Illuminist and master alchemist Comenius in his 1668 book entitled The Way of Light. Remember, Lucifer is the fallen angel of light. The book was dedicated to the first scientific organization in Western history, Britain's August Royal Society. In it, Comenius addressed the first formal scientists as, quote, Illuminati, end quote, and outlined their scientific purpose, quote, which is to secure the empire of the human mind over matter, end quote. And I've had so many people call me or write me and deny the very existence of the Illuminati. In a key Rosicrucian description of the city of Utopia, it is shown to be dominated, ladies and gentlemen, by science and mechanics, and more ominously by the medical dissection of cadavers, in other words, by the hyper-analytical obsession of rationalism with dead matter and measurement. The utopian city of the Rosicrucians is before us today. New York and Los Angeles, Babylon the Great. And it was planned in 1668 and long, long before. You see, we have forgotten the depth of the roots of the modern disease. We have accepted the pap that anything that predated the more obvious rapacity of modern industrial pollution was natural or magical. The notion of magic being identified with the pristine. Hence, we have denied ourselves knowledge of the beginning of the rise of the cryptocracy. John Mitchell said, quote, it is their immediate concern, having eaten of the tree of knowledge, to apply all their newly acquired arts to constructing a facsimile of the garden, a model paradise, end quote. But you see, they just don't get it. There was already an architecture prior to man's imposition of his structures and inventions. This was the architecture of the natural landscape as shaped by God. To claim that to have left it as it was would have been barbarous and backward is symptomatic of the diseased occult mind and its gigantic egotistical pathology. I have never in my life seen anything ever built or rendered by the hand of man that ever equaled the absolute breathtaking beauty of the natural scape. As long as it was left as God created, it was paradise. Everybody is looking for the Garden of Eden. Don't you understand? It's all around you. The earth is the Garden of Eden. We were cast out of it. Due to our blindness, we feverishly cooperate with the imposition upon the earth as our own version of Eden, which always ends in the creation of Babylon, hell on earth. John Mitchell said again, quote, settlement leads to the establishment of social hierarchies, to specialization, the development of arts and sciences, the building of temples and houses. For millions of years, men, essentially the same as we are now, lived without these and presumably without feeling the need for them. Tacitus described a German tribe that lived entirely without artificial shelter. The phenomenon of successive towns built around the same sacred place, the spirit of which became the foundation deity, receiving the sacrifices offered in expiation of the crime of settlement, and giving the law by which the city was governed. Implicit in this law was a contract between man and God, by which the first was permitted a conditional and limited use of land for agricultural and building in return for duties and observances paid to the second. So it was understood by the founding fathers of all of the ancient cities. And the rituals tell you this. But as cities expand, these limitations become more onerous and neglected, with the result that, in the language of Apocalypse, the city becomes Babylon, the parasitic whore, and proceeds toward destruction. In this belief, the traditional element in ancient Rome objected to expansion beyond the original city boundaries, considering it a breach of the foundation contract. Such counsels were, of course, ignored, just as they're ignored today, and in consequence, Rome, following the career of all previous empires, became Babylon indeed. Civilization, you see, tends to grow more elaborate and to make ever greater demands on the earth that sustains it. There comes a time when the old natural devotion to the earth is exchanged for the desire to increase the products of the earth by artificially stimulating its fertility. This stage is marked in history by the appearance of sun gods, divinities of reason, intellect, and centralized government, whose legends refer always to their victories over dragons, in effect, nature. The dragon is sometimes representative of self. The battle in the mind. When St. George was said to have slain the dragon, he overcame himself. This policy of artificially increasing the earth's fertility and multiplying the gifts of its spirit, instead of accepting what is given by nature, is evident in the staking of the earth in symbolism, as is seen in the motif of the knight spearing the dragon, which is sometimes viewed as the pinnacle of the victory of light over dark. How many times have you heard Clinton say that? There's a great battle between the forces of light over the forces of darkness. Cicero said the same thing. Hitler said the same thing. All through history, despots and Babylons have been mouthing the same thing over and over and over again. But ladies and gentlemen, we should also be aware that there is an alternate, occult reading of this image. This Arthurian symbol has been celebrated by pagans and Freemasons as a sign of man's usurpation of natural creation. The staking process is seen by them as a means to pin down the heretofore flowing character of the energy of creation so as to be harnessed and bled by Stonehenge-like technology in order to give greater and greater resources to man. The Washington Monument is one such pinning down. It is the phallus of Osiris, the generative force, capturing the creative energy for man's use. Mitchell said, quote, "The appearance of the sun god signals the introduction of a technology that aims to alter the natural channels of the earth spirit and to stimulate its energies for the benefit of an increasingly large settled population. From all that has recently been discovered about the scientific knowledge and methods of the megalith builders, it appears that their system was in the magical tradition of Egypt, Babylon, and the ancient East. At Delphi, by spearing the serpent and localizing its energies, Apollo raised the productivity of the oracle. Every ancient standing stone is like the omphalos in the temple of Apollo, driven into the head of the telluric serpent current, fixing and augmenting the earth energies which had formerly fluctuated." Yet in the end, the system became onerous and ineffective, demanding at least as much from the people as it gave in return. Here is revealed the inevitable betrayal by the institutionalized system of technology of the people who have come to depend upon it. The land had become more productive, the people richer and more numerous, until, under the influence of cyclical changes in the heavens, the flow began to withdraw from the temples and take other paths. The latter-day priests, having neglected the principles of the old astronomical science by which the temples were first sited and planned, and no longer sensitive to the earth's spiritual energies, could only resort to more frantic invocations, attended by ever-increasing sacrifice in attempts to repeat the former results, and thus followed, as it has on many occasions and in many places over the world, a reaction against the artificial and ever more futile proceedings of the magicians and a return to simpler ways." End quote. We will continue this tomorrow night. Good night, ladies and gentlemen, and God bless each and every single one of you. You're listening to the Hour of the Time. I'm William Cooper. Ladies and gentlemen, what you just heard was a warning. A warning that right now doesn't make too much sense to most of you, but over the next few years will become increasingly clear. Everyone in America knows that there is something terribly wrong. They can feel it in their gut. Every time we turn around, some new restriction is placed upon our life, upon our business, upon our children, upon our purchasing power. Have you ever asked yourself why it is that in the greatest nation that has ever existed upon the face of this earth, with the most opportunity, with a constitution that guarantees and protects individual creator-endowed rights, where anyone can rise to the ultimate ability of their own desires, ambition, or needs? Have you ever asked yourself, why is it that every year we just get poorer and poorer? And in a country where one person used to be able to earn enough money to feed the entire family and clothe the family and house the family, now it takes the husband and the wife, and sometimes the children, to accomplish this same exact feat. What, ladies and gentlemen, has gone wrong in this country? Well, we will explore some of these things tonight and every night on the Hour of the Time. Don't go away. I'll be right back. A New World Order. Everybody thinks that maybe George Bush just coined that phrase off the top of his head, but not so, ladies and gentlemen. It's been bandied about throughout the history of the world. Hitler talked about a new order of the world. Some of his underlings actually used the term New World Order. And I could, in fact, go on and on and on. However, I want to cover tonight some important information, I believe. And so, as soon as I figure out what I've done with these CDs here, I will get to that. Okay, now I know what I did. In the beginning of human existence, according to the Bible, God created man and he created woman as a companion to man, and he placed them in what the Bible calls the Garden of Eden. In this garden there was a tree that bore fruit, and it was called the tree of the fruit of knowledge of good and evil. And God forbid Adam and Eve to partake of the fruit of that tree. And he told them, if ye do, ye will surely die. And he appointed Adam and Eve to be the caretakers of the garden, and of the trees and plants, and of the beasts, and animals and birds, and of the earth. But there is an esoteric version of what happened at that time, and it is a metaphor, ladies and gentlemen. The people who expound this story do not believe in God. They do not believe in Satan. They do not believe in a devil. It is their story of the theory of evolution, and it's exactly where that theory comes from. It is known in the esoteric language of the mystery schools, the fraternal organizations, if you will, the secret societies of the world, as the Luciferian philosophy. You see, they believe that man was held prisoner in the Garden of Eden by an unjust and vindictive God, and that man, in his innocence, existing and rooting about upon instinct, was at the mercy of nature, of the elements, and of the beasts, and of the terror of the night. Lucifer argued with God about the condition of man in this Garden of Eden and was flung out of heaven. Lucifer went in the personage of Satan. Some say that Satan is the servant of Lucifer, and seduced Eve to partake of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and Eve in turn seduced Adam to do the same. And the argument that Lucifer used to cause this to happen was that God had lied to Adam and Eve and was withholding from them their true nature. And since he was withholding from them their true nature, and was, according to Lucifer, holding them in slavery, bound in the chains of ignorance, he was withholding from them their true destiny. And the promise of Satan was this: God has lied to you. You must eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and if you do, you will not surely die, but ye will be as gods. And so Eve partook of the fruit, and Adam partook of the fruit. And according to this esoteric metaphor of the mystery schools, Satan bestowed the gift of intellect upon man and upon woman. The Bible calls it the fall. In the esoteric language of the mysteries, it is the rise into the potential of godhood, the apotheosis, if you will. And through the use of this intellect, man himself will become God by overcoming the forces of nature and the beasts of the field, and leaving that state of innocence and that perfect balance of nature, and creating the Tower of Babel, ladies and gentlemen, which is representative of society and civilization. Many people read those stories and never understand them. I am not commenting, ladies and gentlemen, upon which is right or which is wrong. I am just telling you that it is what it is. I have told you what the Bible says and what Christianity believes, and I have told you the metaphor of the esoteric teachings of the mystery religion of ancient Babylon. And that is what they believe. Satan is represented as Prometheus. Prometheus, remember, was the bolt of lightning flung from the sky, is the messenger in the ancient mythology. The gift of fire to man by the bolt represented by the bolt of lightning striking a tree is the representation of the gift of intellect and the beginning of everything that has followed hence. For without fire there would be no civilization, there would be no industry, there would be no society, there would be nothing. And some ancient man, according to this ancient mystery religion of Babylon, saw this lightning, saw Prometheus bring this gift and strike the tree, which began to burn, took a branch, and learned how to keep that fire alive. And even today, ladies and gentlemen, even today in the modern mystery religions, there is the ceremony of maintaining the eternal flame, the flame that is never allowed to die upon the altar. It was in ancient Mesopotamia, ancient Assyria, ancient Egypt, ancient Rome, and it is today. In fact, the adepts of this mystery religion scoff at us as they maintain the eternal flame burning upon the sacrificed king whom they killed in Dealey Plaza in Dallas, Texas, on November the 22nd, 1963, John F. Kennedy. The mythical satanic bringer of civilization to Earth was supposed to be some sort of alien from the star system Sirius, as one story goes, around whom the ancient Egyptians and all subsequent hermetic systems of these secret societies constructed their elaborate and obsessive religio-astronomic observances. This star, ladies and gentlemen, known as Sirius, also served as an astronomic secret code, an allegory of the illusory quality and inherent trickiness of what is known as the material world. In astronomic magnitude, Sirius is approximately 35 times brighter than our sun. In fact, it is regarded as the greater light in the highest occult circles, as analogous to the hidden god of the cosmos. For just as the star Sirius's true magnitude is dwarfed by the sun of our solar system by means of this illusion generated by distance, so too, ladies and gentlemen, is the influence of Satan in the world obscured behind a welter of churches and lip service to the teachings of Christ. The emblem of the all-seeing eye above the unfinished pyramid is in fact the representation of the eye of Sirius and of its omniscient surveillance, which literally means in the exoteric world, and that means what you, the profane, can understand, there are adepts and initiates everywhere, and they are watching you. It would be extremely difficult to exaggerate the fanatical degree of attachment the priesthood of Egypt and all the subsequent related Hermetic traditions had and still have for the star Sirius. You see, the entire calendar year of the Egyptians was based upon the rising times of this star. The heliacal rising of Sirius, ladies and gentlemen, was so important to the ancient Egyptians that gigantic temples were constructed with their main aisles oriented precisely towards the spot on the horizon where Sirius would appear. The light of Sirius would be channeled along the corridor due to this precise orientation in order to flood the altar in the inner sanctum as if a pinpointed spotlight had been switched on. This blast of light, focused from a single star, was possible because of the orientation being so incredibly precise and because the temple would be otherwise in total darkness within. In a huge, utterly dark temple, the light of one star focused solely on the altar must have made quite an impact on those present, especially the initiates, are those present to receive an initiation. According to the astronomer John A. Eddy, the rock circle located near Lovell, Wyoming, known as the Bighorn Medicine Wheel, is aligned with the rising of Sirius. And you can find this in the article called Astronomical Alignment of the Bighorn Medicine Wheel in Science, issue of June the 7th, 1974, where it says, and I quote, "The heliacal rising of Sirius was also important to other ancient peoples. Here is a description by the ancient Greek poet Aratus of the rising of Sirius, often known as the dog star, as it is in the constellation Canis, or dog. The tip of his, or the dog's, terrible jaw is marked by a star, that keenest of all blazes with a searing flame, and him men call Sirius." Throughout Latin literature, there are many references to the dog days which followed the heliacal rising of Sirius in the summer. These hot, parched days were thought by that time to derive some of their ferocity and dryness from the searing of Sirius, which, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, is the brightest star in the heavens. Further on in this study, you may see that a key ritual sacrifice intended to imprint the group mind of the masses of the 1970s, that's right, ladies and gentlemen, I said the 1970s, the Son of Sam serial murders involved the orders from a dog named Sam. The later capture of one of the killers in the cult, a man by the name of David Berkowitz, coincided with the coming of the dog days of summer in August 1977. In Satanists and 33rd degree Freemason Albert Pike's 8th degree of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, the focus of worship is on the blazing star as symbolized by the pentagram, and Pike identifies Sirius in his Morals and Dogma as the grand builder of architecture. John Mitchell said this: "The alchemists aimed to recapture the spirit of Mercurius as the mobile agent in their operations, and they spoke of fixing it, using the imagery of the stake driven through the earth serpent, by which means their predecessors, alchemists of elemental cosmic forces, had attempted to raise the subtle spirit of the earth. All these good people shared the noblest ambition to invoke again the golden age on earth. No doubt, in time, they did much to promote human convenience and comfort, and civilizations have been humanized by such efforts. But their falls have thereby only been delayed. For the human spirit, like the spirit of the earth, is a natural wanderer and does not forever accept domesticity. Attempts to fix nature's volatile principle will always be made, and the spirit may, for a time, accept the ways imposed upon it by human nature in its material aspect. But sooner or later, it will prefer its own ways, and will take them whatever obstacles are put in its path. And that was taken from The Earth Spirit by John Mitchell, or The Earth Spirit, published by Crossroad Publishing Company. So, we observe that Saturn and his Golden Age architecture, both mental and physical, came only after the end of Eden. After Saturn, Sirius, had separated the unity of heaven and earth by means of his fateful sickle. So what do we have behind the cover story about a workers' paradise in the Soviet Union? We have the sickle, the very occult symbol of the bisection of heaven and earth, the very symbol of the destruction of Eden by demonic accelerated material and temporal decay, and, most important, false philosophies which generate division, a la Hegel, between humanity's sense of itself and identification with God's divine creation, under the cover of slogans of unity. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, we have a grotesque mockery of the very principle touted. This macabre arrogance borders on the clownish for those initiates or self-initiates who have the wit to see it. And I hope that you do. Have you ever noticed how television and print media will scream themselves hoarse in news, documentaries, editorials, and heavy analytical pieces about rising pornography, crime, violence, gunplay, etc.? And yet, in the very same TV guide announcing the very latest special on the crisis of sex and violence in America will appear an advertisement for Miami Vice, the show that brings you the action and excitement you've come to expect, etc., 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 ad nauseum. Your newspaper, ladies and gentlemen, take a good look at it, especially the Arizona Repulsive. But it doesn't have to be in Arizona. There's one in every state. In fact, there's two in every major city. And if you'll check, they're both owned by the same corporation. One professes to be liberal, one professes to be conservative, and the population is fooled that they have a voice. And that is how news is controlled, and that's how you're manipulated. It's no different in Phoenix than it is in New York, or Boston, or Chicago, or Los Angeles, or anywhere else. Your newspaper will condemn sex and violence in the loftiest terms, but right there in the entertainment section is a half-page advertisement for a new action movie accompanied by a photo of women in string bikinis and high heels fondling automatic pistols and machine gun phalanx symbols. You see, right there in front of you is the official attack on sex and violence. There is the official attack on Satanism, and yet you need not be Sherlock Holmes to detect that the very themes which Orthodox officialdom condemns with its right hand, its left hand, counterculture officialdom disseminates. There is a man, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino, whom I exposed in my book, Behold a Pale Horse, who works for United States Army Military Intelligence. He is also the leader of the Temple of Set, a satanic church characterized as satanic by the official orthodoxy of the system. Michael Aquino, in a letter to the St. Louis Post-Dispatch of February the 6th, 1989, responded to attacks on his organization by a supposedly scandalized culture that is itself satanic. And he said this, quote, "If teenage gangs may experiment with what they believe to be occult rituals, blame should be laid squarely at the feet of the media which glamorize occult violence to youth. I specifically refer to the movie industry, with offerings of increasingly gory and violent splatter films, such as Nightmare on Elm Street with its child molester hero Freddy, Halloween, Friday the 13th, etc. Note that such films usually include several sequels also targeted at children, and Freddy now has his own weekly television series, and parents wonder where children are getting all their bizarre occult ideas. Please turn on your television sets any evening or examine even the PG horror movie offerings at your local video store, much less the R category. End quote. That's how Michael Aquino justified his leadership of the Satanic Church, the Temple of Set in San Francisco. The mechanism of prissy 6 o'clock TV news show put-downs and exposés with the little Barbie doll and the little Ken guy sitting there, of the very satanic sex and violence which are lustily celebrated on the same channel on their 10 o'clock movie, is sheer hypocrisy of the most blatant and perverse form. It's not concealed at all. Yet, ladies and gentlemen, we cooperate with it. We do. We are its prey, and we consent to be preyed upon. We lift up our chins so that our throat is exposed, so that the wolf can more easily sever our jugular vein. Both sides, light and shadow, have magnetic attraction for us, and that is the failing of the human nature. Everyone likes to say that, and this is what I really loved about Flip Wilson, he brought it home to us, those of us who would listen, the devil made me do it. Oh, the devil made, I would never done that, but the devil laid his hands on me, the devil made me do it. That woman never made anybody do anything, ladies and gentlemen. We did it if we did it. You did it if you did it. I did it if I did it. And that's the truth. The official orthodoxy simply allows us to indulge our good sense about ourselves as people who can still be outraged. That makes us feel better about it. Meanwhile, the establishment's official counterculture allows us to indulge our guilty pleasures, as they are once again openly referred to by a pair of syndicated TV movie critics, and I'll let you guess who they are. Pleasure, as distinct from joy or happiness, is almost always enhanced by the patina of the forbidden, and having reassured our persona of our essential goodness by sharing in the condemnations promulgated by the official orthodoxy, we can then fling ourselves headlong into guilty indulgence of the very themes we agreed were execrable when condemned on the nightly news. Amazing, isn't it? You want to know the cities where pornography sells the most? You want to know the cities where pornographers make more money than any place else? It's cities, ladies and gentlemen, where pornography is totally and completely outlawed. Why? Simply because of human nature. We are sorely tempted by that which is denied to us. The collective occult schizophrenia, or mass insanity, if you will, extends to Judeo-Christians who condemn Satanism as a concept when presented in church forums, television chat shows, and police seminars, but who relax and divert themselves with satanic television and videos. There's a good and evil side of everyone. You show me anyone, anywhere, I don't care who it is, and I don't care where it is, who is the pillar of the community, who has never done wrong, whom no one could ever suspect of ever indulging in anything bad or evil or pornographic or seditious or anything you wish to name. And I guarantee you that if I follow them around with a television camera concealed for 6 months, what I could reveal to you from that little excursion would probably destroy your community. For everyone has something they're hiding in their closet. Some fault, some defect, some temptation, some evil deed that they have done years ago, and maybe that they have repented and would never do it again, but it is there lurking in the shadows nevertheless. And if there is such a person who has not been tempted, who has not fallen into a bad companionship, who has not performed some deed of which they are grossly ashamed, then maybe we have missed the return of Christ. And I don't think we've missed anything, ladies and gentlemen. Modern people are fascinated with exposés of sex, violence, and Satanism, and fascination is itself a form of mind control. If we recognize that oftentimes obsessive treatments of these themes under the guise of exposing them are the very means of inducing interest and involvement in the occult, in sex, in violence, in Satanism, in crime. Do you think people really watch Cops because they want to see how the police do their work? You know, you might foist that explanation off on somebody. That's stupid, but don't try it with me, because I know, and so do you. And I won't listen to your lie. You watch it because you see what is forbidden to you in the guise of something that is legitimate to view. People who never hear about Satanism, extreme violence, and extreme pornography are unlikely to become involved with Satanism, violence, and pornography. And the extent of their temptation and the skeletons that they hide in their closets are similarly reduced in magnitude. Those who fill their heads with morbid fascination, with lurid media depictions of evil in the world, under the pretense of putting an end to such evil, are actually, ladies and gentlemen, part of the process which precedes its wider acceptance. The film, The Exorcist, is instructive in this vein. Under the guise of exposing Satanism, it brutalized its audience with pornography in a powerful occult milieu, and many of them have fallen into its wider temptation. Roman Polanski's popular Hollywood film Rosemary's Baby was also presented from the vantage of supposedly exposing the danger of Satanism, but has accurately been called the very best advertisement for Satanism ever made in history, an allegory of the birth of the demonic eon. Polanski has himself been implicated in child molestation. It has also been alleged that he videotaped pornography involving children and animals for sale to a private network, possibly in association with Charles Manson, whose followers ritually sacrificed Polanski's wife Sharon Tate and her unborn baby. They knew exactly where they were going that night. Tate herself may have been involved in the occult, possibly the Process Church of the Final Judgment, a satanic group which Manson was also associated with. For reference, see the book Painted Black, Harper and Row, pages 115 and 116, and also another book, The Manson File, pages 168 to 172. You see, we document everything on this broadcast. Of course, no matter what her affiliations, Sharon Tate's murder was still a heinous crime. It is a heinous crime even if someone volunteers to be the victim in a human sacrificial rite upon an altar. It is still a crime. A heinous crime, a terrible loss of the potential of a human life. I find it interesting to note that while much is made of the murder of her unborn baby as being the most horrible part of the Manson gang's occult violence, women who pay physicians to kill their unborn babies are not regarded as guilty of any satanic act, heinous or otherwise, and yet in my estimation, in my belief, and I believe in fact it is murder. Was the sacrifice of Sharon Tate's unborn baby somehow a ritual precursor of the coming mass sacrifice of unborn children, which was subsequently legalized by the United States Supreme Court? The media puts us on intimate terms with Satan by immersing us in his spectacular electronic videodrome kingdom. Was it by some sort of television that Satan tempted Christ? The devil showed him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time. All these I will give thee if thou wilt fall down and worship me. Luke chapter 4 verse 5, Matthew chapter 4 verses 8 and 9. The double mind. The profoundly disturbed mind at war with itself and ignorant even of that fact is a characteristic of the scapegoat patsy, lone nut, cult killers, and of the American people in general. For in this time frame of ours, we are initiated into their cult solely by means of our exposure to the electronic videodrome, and thus our prospects become the same as those of David Berkowitz, Mark David Chapman, Arthur Brimmer, James Earl Ray, and many others. In the 19th century, the phenomenon was termed Masonic apoplexy. Today, ladies and gentlemen, it is called zombieism. Isn't it amazing? And we have families, ladies and gentlemen, who live together, sometimes even work together, sometimes play together, but have never talked to each other. Oh yeah, get up, it's time to get up, Johnny. Okay, Ma. What's for breakfast? Bye, see you later. Folks, that's not talking. Before the age of radio, and I go back that far because that was the beginning of the alienation of human beings from each other. People talked to each other. They spoke to each other. They communicated their feelings. They loved. They did things together. Communities met together. There was a time when people would sit upon their front porch so as to more easily be able to communicate and talk with their neighbors. When someone came to visit, they did not turn on a radio or a television set. They sat in the parlor and talked to each other. They conversed, and they played games, and they expressed humanity. When radio came along, much of that changed, although there was still a great deal of communication between people, and amongst family members there were times when everyone sat in complete utter silence listening to the radio. And I can remember when I was a boy doing exactly that, allowing my imagination to run rampant, listening to radio shows such as The Whistler, The Creaking Door, Suspense, Let's Pretend, The Lone Ranger, Sergeant Preston and his dog Yukon King, Hopalong Cassidy, Gene Autry. Oh, those were wonderful times. Oh, you bet they were. And I don't know any young child who would not have reveled in those episodes of suspense and intrigue and adventure that opened up the world to us who lived in a very narrow quarter and had no idea of anything outside of our little realm. And that was the beginning of globalism, whether you realize it or not. And then came television. And now people don't talk to anybody at all. It's all stopped dead in its tracks. We'll continue this tomorrow night, ladies and gentlemen. Good night. And God bless each and every single one of you.
They want it all. Last night, ladies and gentlemen, we left off talking about the symptomatic condition known as Masonic apoplexy in the 19th century, and today it is called zombieism. Let's continue by looking at the modern Catholic Church under Popes John the 23rd and Paul the 6th and Pope John Paul the 2nd, which, taking a leaf, ladies and gentlemen, from the Elizabethan Anglican Archbishop Thomas Cranmer, announced publicly an enlightened new universal reform, born of Vatican Council II's spirit of renewal and openness, henceforward to be marked by a new reverence for lay involvement, dialogue, and, catch this, democracy. And you hear people like Pat Robertson and Paul Crouch echoing these same sentiments, in fact calling for the Pope to take leadership over the Christian church worldwide, including Protestantism. How can that be? For Protestant means to protest against the Catholic Church. Something is happening here, ladies and gentlemen, that you had better pay very close attention to. Now, remember, this is not a religious broadcast, and I am not criticizing your religion, whatever religion you belong to. I am merely calling your attention to the manipulation of all of us by the leaders of some of these religious movements and churches. Now, just as Cranmer sneered at the common peasants in England who dared to protest the repression of the traditional liturgy, Cranmer had claimed they no longer wanted the Vatican II Catholic Church, in the name of new freedoms, also suppressed, against the wishes of the common people, the old liturgy. They've just turned it around. It was outlawed, and a modern liturgy designed by the Freemason Annibale Bugnini and love, spelled L-U-H-V, rhetoric, to justify the suppression in the name of the people's wishes, followed it. Cranmer murdered en masse the English Catholic peasants who rose in defense of the old liturgy. Cranmer massacred them and crushed their peasant uprising, which became known as the Western Rising. It was the time, in fact, when the old Knights Templars, seeking their revenge, again took control of the Knights Hospitallers, now known as the Knights of Malta, or more correctly, the ancient and military Order of the Knights of Malta, which is, in fact, the militia of the Pope. Later, the infiltration of the Vatican by the Masonic Order was complete by the Propaganda II Lodge in Italy, which was created by the Central Intelligence Agency, working in concert with the Mafia. And this is all documented in Piers Compton's excellent work, fully documented and sourced, known as The Broken Cross. This Protestant Inquisition is seldom mentioned nowadays, in keeping with the massive strategy of tarring only the Catholic Church with the brush of inquisitor, and thereby building up the Protestantism as the exclusive true Christianity. Not so. They have presented this false picture to the world because Protestantism was the chosen vehicle, ladies and gentlemen, through which Freemasonry infiltrated Christianity and through which it is destroying the church today. Protestants, not just Catholics, persecuted and executed thousands of Anabaptists, which were the forerunners of today's Mennonites and Amish peoples. Michael Servetus, a dissenting mathematician, was burned at the stake in Switzerland by Calvinists. According to contemporary adherents of paganism, the 16th century covens of Wicca sided with the Protestant Queen Elizabeth against the Catholics, in appreciation of her having awarded Satanist John Dee, the founder of Freemasonry in England, high office in her government. And for that, you can look in The Pinnacle and the Wand by Howard Rheingold, by the Whole Earth Review, spring 1992, page 61. The French Revolution of 1789, which was also known as the Reign of Terror, was a Masonic war against the Catholic Church and the Catholic people of France, a war conducted with all the instruments of torture and all the atrocities of an Inquisition. The Masonic hanging judge, Jean-Baptiste Carrier, ordered the execution of 13,000 Catholics who were drowned in the Loire River in boats especially designed just for that purpose. And on December the 23rd, 1793, the Masonic General Francois Westermann attacked the Catholic village of Savigny, killing hundreds of Catholic women and children. Westermann bragged that he had trampled children under horses' feet and massacred women who will no longer give birth to brigands. His exact words. In 1794, another of the generals of the French Revolution, the Freemason Louis-Marie Turreau, ordered the slaughter of 109 Catholic children in the village of Lux-sur-Boulogne. In the western section of France, in the area around Nantes, known as the Vendée, hundreds of thousands of Catholics, were slaughtered by the Masonic government of the French Revolution. Thousands of their religious leaders were also killed in Paris and other areas for their opposition to the suzerainty of the Masonic cryptocracy. A great deal, ladies and gentlemen, has changed since then, however. Today, the Vatican is as firmly in the pocket of the Freemasons as are many Protestant institutions in this country. Most memorable is the recent takeover of the Southern Baptist Church in its entirety by the Masonic Brotherhood. It is not secret. It has been openly admitted Pope John Paul II, presented in the Masonic media as a strict conservative, is actually an agent of one world, New Age, Luciferianism. But don't just climb on the Catholic Church, folks. Almost all of the organized church bodies that exist in the world today are in the clutches of Mystery Babylon. In 1986, Pope John Paul II convened a World Council of Religions, including African devil worshippers, Buddhists, and Muslims, at a church named after the Apostle Peter in Assisi, Italy. According to the New York Times of October 28, 1986, I quote, "The Buddhists, led by the Dalai Lama, quickly converted the altar of the Church of San Pietro by placing a small statue of the Buddha atop the tabernacle and setting prayer scrolls and incense burners around it." End quote. The Dalai Lama of Tibet is revered as a god-king by his followers. Talk about the abomination of desolation. Sincere Christians of all denominations condemned the Assisi rite. Protestant leader Dr. Carl McIntyre called it, and I quote, "the greatest single abomination in church history," end quote. Catholic Bishop Marcel Lefebvre labeled Pope John Paul II's actions in Assisi, quote, "the supreme imposture, the culminating insult to our Lord, a diabolical act," end quote. Thus we observe the conflict between truths perceived deep within and lies people force themselves to assent to in public. In the name of the people, the wishes of the people are overthrown. Is there a reason this double mind has been induced? If someone is making us deliberately mentally ill, it may be that this is done so that we will look to that someone for healing and relief. Into the double mind breach step the elite managers of the Masonic Hermetic Academy, who through symbol and word manipulation can temporarily unite our persona and anima, thus lifting an immense burden from us, relieving us, if you will, of our stress and confusion. Oh, you have a problem? We have an answer. Oh, a building blew up in Oklahoma City? My goodness, let us protect you, for this could happen to any building. Let us take away your arms and ammunition so that you cannot protect yourself. Let us furnish your security. Trust us. We will be good to you. We will never become despotic or tyrannical. We would never, ever murder 86 people in a small Christian church in Waco, Texas, just because they had not paid a $200 tax for a supposed automatic weapon which they never had in the first place. And of course, we would never shoot and murder a mother unarmed, who was guilty of no crime, wanted for nothing, standing in a doorway holding her baby to her breast. We will protect you. Give us your guns. Give us your arms. Let us take care of you. We will save you from yourselves. Isn't that what we hear? The double mind breach. They're relieving us of our stress and confusion. And this function can easily, ladies and gentlemen, assume in the minds of the subject patients, the people, a godlike status. I submit this status is characterized by the use of the term they in our society, as in, why don't they come up with a tire that will never wear out or a cure for cancer? As in, they have a cure for cancer, but the doctors would lose too much money, so they have suppressed it. Or, they say the CIA killed Kennedy and he was fornicating with Marilyn throughout his presidency. They write the movie scripts and the billboard slogans. They have the money and the power and control of the illusion machine. They can cure cancer or withhold the cure. They reveal the secrets behind assassinations and scandals. What will they do next? How will they program the show today? Let's sit back, watch, and find out. And since we choose to refuse to genuinely heal the rift between the two sides of our mentality by the tough means of repudiating our lying public persona and taking action on the understanding of our true self, we relinquish autonomy to those who make it appear that they can heal us at no great cost or trouble on our part. You don't have to be responsible. You don't have to take any risk. You don't even have to get up off your couch. We will heal you. We will provide you security. We will take care of you. But never mind that they are also the ones who implanted the rift in the first place, a la Hegel, and the dialectic is working upon us all the time. The point is, ladies and gentlemen, we have little or no power. We cannot act. We cannot invent. We cannot cure. We must wait and see what happens. We must see what they make happen. And if you believe that, you're already dead and buried. And if you want proof that that's not true, I am living proof. The final coffin in the nail of our free will is the fact that we ourselves know in our heart of hearts that what I just told you is not true. It is false. And I have proven it false over and over and over again. When they told me that no one would listen, I drove thousands of miles to talk to 3 people in someone's living room until there were groups listening. When they said I couldn't write a book because no one would publish it, I wrote a book and it was published. And it became the underground bestseller for over 6 years in a row. When they said I could not get on radio, no one would allow me to have a voice on radio, I created my own broadcast and paid for it myself. And when they said no newspaper in this country prints the truth, I started my own newspaper and named it Truth, Veritas, which is Latin for truth, and send it free to everybody in Washington, D.C., so they know that I know and that I'm printing it. And it's the fastest growing newspaper in the nation. And when they began their attack upon the patriots and constitutionists and Christians in this country, after the bombing of the Oklahoma Mura Federal Building, I set my people into motion to investigate and discover the truth of that bombing. And I hounded my station chief, Michelle Marie Moore, until she wrote a book on the findings of our investigation. And I can assure you, it is turning Oklahoma up on its ear. You see, it is we the people who have the power and the responsibility. And we could crush them tomorrow morning if we but chose to do it. You see, they are only an illusion, every bit as ephemeral as the patter of a carnival sideshow bunco artist beckoning to us from the other side of the hoochie-coochie tent. And that is the truth. They practice magic. Magic is nothing but the art of illusion. And if they can fog your brain and dazzle you with baffling BS, and if they can desensitize you with flooding you with violence on a daily basis over and over and over again on television and in movies and on radio, they are practicing magic. Through the art of illusion, they are destroying your ability to act and to think and to perform. They are taking away your power, but it is not really they who take it away. It is you who give it. You give it by your participation in this magic act. But you see, some people know that we have the power. And some people know, they know that we could crush them tomorrow morning if we chose. But they don't want to, you see, because if we overthrew them tomorrow, we would have to write our own scripts and be responsible and take care of ourselves and take risks and provide for our own securities. We would have to heal ourselves. We would have to admit the colossal waste and loss and destruction of the past years, which our laziness and folly have made possible. We would have to experience the pain of being alive and responsible. We would have to start acting like men and women instead of as children, as slaves, and as weaklings, as we are prone to do today on a daily basis. The Hermetic Academy, being great scholars of human nature, know this and depend upon our ignorance, apathy, and stupidity and our willingness to go along with this magic act in order to enslave us and in control. Take us by the strings, the puppet strings, and when they play the tune, we will dance. Boy, I bet that's enough to make you sleep well tonight, but I'm not finished, ladies and gentlemen, so don't go away. I will be right back. V.I. Lenin, the founder of the old Soviet Union, the leader of the Bolshevik Revolution, if you will, said democracy is indispensable to socialism, and he is absolutely correct. This is not a democracy, was never intended to be, cannot be, if we are to maintain and keep our freedom. Democracy leads to socialism, which leads to dictatorship, which leads to total ownership and control of everything and everybody by the state. It leads to a system where the state is supreme and the individual is nothing less than dung. Oh yes. Where the state pretends to pay you and you will ultimately pretend to work. They will build, again, vodka factories, and the populace will drown itself in a sea of alcohol in order to overcome, for just a short while, their misery. I have just described the old Soviet Union, and I am describing the future in the New World Order. You see, the Hermetic Academy is confident, and not without reason, ladies and gentlemen, that we will offer no substantial, no meaningful resistance to their imperium. Why? Well, the foster mothers of the human race, at least in the West, are cows. Perhaps we've imbibed so much of their fluid that we have become cows, terrified of freedom and its responsibilities. Epistemologist Charles Fort once remarked, quote, "I think we're farmed," end quote. And if you look back in the history of the human race, you will see that until this country was formed, that is exactly the condition in which the human race found itself, and every man and woman upon its surface of this earth was owned by somebody, some king, some sultan, some emir, some emperor, some lord, somebody. And according to the secret tradition of the Hermetic Academy, some of the secret societies believe the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden was a psychedelic mushroom, Stropharia cubensis. And these mushrooms, ladies and gentlemen, grow only in cow dung. There are essentially two forces competing for the hearts and minds of mankind. The first is the old force of the orthodoxy of the church and the throne, symbolized by the cross in the crown. It comes from the days when the Catholic Church not only ruled the church, but ruled the kings who ruled the nations. It was the combination of the church and state. A very dangerous combination, I might add. Reaction and authority. Those who regard themselves as dissidents and rebels against the establishment have been taught by the official counterculture that it is from this direction, from the ancient regime, that we can expect to encounter the greatest threat to liberty. We've been trained to expect that the threat to freedom comes from Christian religious and ethical orthodoxies based on faith and authority. And as long as government and religion can remain basically out of the control of each other, that is, the government does not control religion and religion does not control the government, we are relatively safe, but not for long. But any halfway competent student of deception will know that the greatest potential threat always comes from the unsuspected direction. It is a greater threat than the combination of religion and state. In this case, from the force that is misidentified and masked, that force which is fascism with a human face. It's called democracy. It's called socialism. It's called I feel your pain. I can't stand it sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, because it's so obvious to me. I've been studying it all my life, however, and I know that it may not be so obvious to you. Perhaps more important, there is one key principle of the psychology of mass mind control missing from the old model of authority embodied by the early fathers of the Christian church. They did not flatter you, and they did not come in disguise. The core of Orthodox Christianity's belief system was anti-occult to the marrow. It was the bad news about human nature. And that's why you don't get any flattery from me either. That's why President Clinton, in a White House memo, which Rush Limbaugh read on the air, named me as the most dangerous radio host in America, because I simply tell you the truth. I will not wax eloquent. I will not polish your knob. I will not lie to you. I will not tell you that you are the most brilliant, smartest, best educated people in the world, because at this very moment it is a lie. You are for the most part apathetic, ignorant, and stupid, or we would not be in the situation that we are in now. And all you have to do to change that is go into your bathroom, look in the mirror, and you will see everything that ails America today. Look yourself right in the eye and say, I have been stupid, apathetic, and ignorant, but I will never be stupid, apathetic, and ignorant again for the rest of my life. I am going to change that right now, and then do it. That's all it takes. I had to do it. Everyone who is awake and functioning in the real world had to do it. If you cannot do it, if you will not do it, then you are indeed a sheeple. Sheeple are no different from sheep, ladies and gentlemen, or cattle, or any other husbanded animal for that matter. They're eventually sheared and then led to the slaughter, usually behind a Judas goat. A nation or world of people who will not use their intelligence are no better than animals who have no intelligence. Such people are beasts of burden and stakes on the table by their own choice and consent. I had to let that soak in. Let you think about that. You see, the revolutionary liberators, from the Soviet communists to the New Age groovers, the Marxists and communists who are in control of the government of the United States of America today, don't tell you the truth. They flatter you. They are the ones who have announced the delivery of humanity from the clutches of reaction and orthodoxy. Of this church of the official counterculture, Louis Ferdinand Céline observed in Mea Culpa, his seminal essay on Bolshevism, and I quote, "Since the end of religions, before this new modern altar, they have been swinging incense, they have been intoxicating man with the sense of his own importance, with all manner of rigmarole. Man has been made the whole church. No longer can he see anything with clear eyes. He is cracked. He believes anything that is told to him, just so long as it is flattering to him, as it is what he wants to hear," end quote. Does that sound familiar? And he went on, and I quote again, "The practical superiority of the great Christian religions was that they did not try to sugarcoat the pill. They did not try to throw dust in the eyes. They were not looking for voters. They never felt the need of ingratiating themselves. They did not wiggle their tails in an effort to please. They just seized man in his cradle and broke the bad news to him without reservation. They told him, 'You little shapeless stinker, you can never be anything but filth. By birth you are nothing but merde.' Do you hear me? You? That's the evidence. That's the principle of everything. However, maybe, in scrutinizing the matter more closely, you have got one little chance of winning a bit of pardon for being as you are, so filthy, so excremental, so unbelievable. That is, if you can hold your chin up in the face of all the sorrows, all the afflictions, all the ordeals, miseries, and tortures you will have to face during your lifetime, whether it be long or short, always with perfect humility. Life, you louse, is just one long, bitter ordeal. Don't get out of breath. Don't expect noon to come at 2 o'clock. Just try to save your soul. That is something in itself. Maybe at the end of this cavalry of yours, if you get to be a regular fellow, a hero in keeping your trap shut, you may be saved by these principles. But even that is not a sure thing. Maybe even that is not a sure thing. One little hair's breadth, less filthy when you come to croak than when you were born, but don't take too much for granted. That's the whole story. Watch your step. Don't speculate on first and last things. For you, that is the maximum. And then there is always the very simple method, according to the church, is just to accept Jesus Christ as your Savior, and you will be saved. And that was seriously spoken by real church fathers who knew the tools of their trade and did not try to do tricks with mirrors. And they knew that man's condition was a condition of perpetual temptation. Which very few have ever, if any, have ever been able to overcome. Even the parties that claim to be antidotes to the excesses of the degraded spirit of modernity, populism, and democracy are thoroughly modern and actually serve as bridges to that tyranny we have been taught to revere as the source of our liberation. Populism and democracy are based on the same notion of statecraft as the enemy they claim to oppose, predicated upon the flattery of man and human nature in order to pimp for votes and influence. It is, don't make waves. Oh, why can't we all get along? Tell you what you want to hear, give you what you want to have. You see, it's not that easy, ladies and gentlemen. Life is a continuous confrontation with forks in the road. One is good, one is bad. And you could always wander completely off the road altogether and become lost. Totally and completely lost. If you take the wrong fork at one of these junctions, there is always the opportunity at the next fork to get back on track. But it is a constant battle within ourselves. You see, I have studied this concept for many, many years, and I have to tell you that if there is a real devil, like Flip Wilson used to say, the devil made me do it. Now, I'm not telling you that there's no such thing as Satan or Lucifer. I'm telling you this. If there really is a devil, that devil exists in the hearts and minds of men and nowhere else. Nowhere else. For if you take man out of the equation, evil ceases to exist, and there is left only the laws of the universe and the balance of nature. Put man in the equation, and before long, evil will rear its ugly head and present itself to the world. The evil is within man, and that is why it was called the fall. The devil never made anyone do it. If you do it, you did it yourself because you fell into temptation. Isn't it amazing? How when all of it is placed in perspective, it's so much easier to understand. You will either go away from tonight's broadcast with a greater understanding of an awful lot, or you will become so incensed and so angry because I have identified some of the very traits in you which you tend to deny and cannot and will not confront. And you will set out to prove me wrong, and in doing so, you will see that I am right, and you will become an ally, eventually, when you have learned to deal with your own sheepleness. For until man once again confronts the real nature of his own condition and of the world around him and accepts full responsibility for his actions without blaming anyone else or any devil, until then we will always be a puppet on the end of someone else's string. And ladies and gentlemen, when that someone pulls that string, we will dance. I hope you understand it takes a great deal of love for America and for Americans to tell you this. Good night, and God bless you all.